Hello, Kevin. Good to meet you.
Good to meet you. Good to meet you.
Thanks very much. Thanks for coming tonight. Are we
You
doing a
bet.
podcast interview? I can't remember. This is a podcast interview, right?
That's what we had it scheduled for. I mean, if we do a podcast, that's cool. If we just talk,
Okay.
whatever you want to do, I'm totally cool with.
No, we're gonna publish this one for sure. I just have to remind
Okay.
myself. If it's a podcast interview, I have to censor myself on certain topics. But we haven't met before. This is our first time
Oh,
having a conversation. But I
that's
know your face. I've seen your face on Facebook for a few years. So maybe you want to tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, and how you got started.
Oh my gosh. What do I do? I introduce the right entrepreneurs to the right people that lead to 5-figure, 6-figure, 7-figure deals. We haven't done an 8-figure deal yet, but that's coming. That'll be coming.
Mhm.
And it will, and it's not even of course the revenue is not what excites me. It's the impact is what excites me. Working with the right entrepreneurs and just being of service to them, we get to make a really big impact in the world. And of course, the bigger impact we make, the more revenue gets created. That's just a natural byproduct of that. And that's been my full-time gig for I've got to look at the calendar. So 8 years now. It's been my full-time gig. Prior to that, for many years, probably over 20 years, I just did it for free. And until I started realizing, you know what? I bet people would totally compensate me for this. I bet they would be willing to share in the added revenue that gets created and all that stuff. And I found out that yeah, they will totally do that and stuff. And but I used to own a publishing company for 12 years.
Okay.
And that's how I got into doing that. Over that 12 years, we did almost 500 strategic partnerships, John, where I partnered with other entrepreneurs who helped me get my message out into the marketplace. That was where I really came to understand the value of right relationships. And I was so grateful for all those partners because without them, without the role that they held in my life, my business certainly would not have grown the way that it did. And I just wanted to, I appreciated them so much. I just wanted to make sure I took really good care of them, giving them a great experience, hopefully making a lot of money together as well. But also, I wanted when they put me in front of their people, I wanted their people going back to them, going, wow, that was an amazing experience. Thanks so much for introducing me to Kevin. And that was what I always strived for and stuff. And just along the way, I have this natural gift. I love talking with entrepreneurs. I love finding out what they're working on. I love what finding out what gets them jazzed, what challenges they're dealing with, what opportunities they're trying to take advantage of. And I just naturally default to who do I know that might be able to help them with this. I just make those connections and my brain just works that way. And so I've been doing that for years. And the first big connection, the real big one in my mind, was 14 years ago. I connected these two guys, Brian Kurtz and Perry Marshall. And those two guys went on to do just absolutely amazing things together. And that's what first got me thinking 14 years ago, wouldn't it be cool if I could have a business where I just got to do that all the time? And here it is. Now that's a reality. So,
Amazing. And that's like coming in at the top when it comes to digital publishing, right? Because Brian Kurtz has been a very influential guy for a long time, and Perry Marshall's one of the kind of people who's best known as like really started a lot of this digital training and marketing training, was one of the first pioneers of this, and has been at the forefront of teaching, especially like Google advertising and marketing strategies for many years.
yeah, he launched the definitive guide to Google AdWords. I believe, I want to say back in 2004, I believe is when he
Hmm.
launched. And I didn't know this until years later when he told me, you were customer number one, the very first person to ever buy the definitive guide to Google AdWords.
No, amazing. I have a copy of that book somewhere around. It wasn't the
Yeah,
first edition. It's probably the 10th or 11th edition. I don't know because it's been going for so many years. He
it
updates it
has.
periodically.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, man, a lot of water under the bridge since those days when the 5 cent clicks on Google way back in the day and stuff. And I started using Perry's stuff to do online advertising. And Brian, I actually met him through Joe Polish years ago. I used to own a cleaning and restoration company. That was my very first business. And I met Joe and got involved in his coaching group for the carpet cleaning and restoration industry. And he had Brian come speak at one of our events and stuff. And that's how I met Brian years ago. And Brian and I ended up becoming really good friends. And yeah, he used to work with Marty Edelston at Boardroom Reports. They were a huge direct mail company and stuff.
Yeah, and again, I've got one of Brian's books somewhere on my shelf as well. I've heard him speak a few times, and again, another guy who's really been in this like online and digital publishing industry since the very, very beginning.
Yeah.
He's somebody who came from traditional publishing and then transitioned into the digital world as well, right?
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
And you said you were previously a publisher yourself. Was that all, were you always in digital, or were you in print publishing in the past as well?
That company I was print publishing. So I'll tell you a quick story. I used to own, like I said, a cleaning and restoration company. I had through Joe Polish, again, I met Dan Kennedy years ago because Dan also spoke at one of Joe's events, and I ended up investing in Dan's magnetic marketing program. And then in 1999 is when it was, 1999, I ended up going to a Dan Kennedy seminar. And that's actually, excuse me, where I met Perry Marshall for the first time, was at that seminar. And Joe Polish was there as well. And Joe was just totally surprised to see me there. And he's like, you're one of my very first cleaning and restoration guy that's made it to a Dan Kennedy seminar. But at that seminar, these guys, Yannick Silver had just come out with his product called Instant Sales Letters. And it was doing really well. And there was all this talk about doing the stuff online, which at the time I had zero experience. Yeah, I had a website for the cleaning and restoration business, but I knew nothing about marketing online and stuff. But that's what planted the seed for, gosh, wouldn't it be cool if I could have a website and it would allow me to, instead of just running a local business, maybe I could do something where I had a nationwide and even a worldwide reach. Wouldn't that be cool? And the next year, we ended up launching this ugly website called getmoldsolutions.com.
Yeah.
And I touted myself as the nation's mold solutions expert. And I just started helping people who had water damage in their homes or dealing with mold or what have you and stuff. And we created an information product. We sold some physical products too and stuff. We sold mold test kits, that kind of thing. But within 3 years, that ugly little website was producing about $15,000 a month in revenue for the company and stuff. And in 2003, Joe Polish was talking to me that spring. He said, "Hey, Kev," he's like, "why don't you come down here to the annual event this year in November and show everybody what you're doing with your website?" Because he held an annual event for the cleaning and restoration businesses. And I was like, "Sure." And he's okay. He's like, "and before you come, be sure to document what you do and how you do it and put it into a course, because a certain percentage of folks, once they hear from you, they're going to want your help. Just make sure you're prepared to offer that to them." And I'm like, all right. And so I ended up creating this course. And a lot of the work was already done because I was doing what I was teaching. I just took screenshots of what I was doing with my website. And I talked about how I did what I did, how I built an email list, all this stuff. And long story short, I spoke at his seminar that November, in November of 03. I probably spoke for about an hour. At the end of my presentation, I just simply said, "Hey, if this resonates with you, if you feel like I might be able to help you, here's what that would look like, and here's what the investment is." And we ended up making $35,000 in sales worth of that course that I had just created. And I was just like, wow. I never make that kind of money in a day in the cleaning and restoration business. and now that we had all these clients and I was offering ongoing coaching for them, and that was the other cool part, it also included a continuity for ongoing coaching. And I would just do that over the telephone, webinars and Zoom, and none of that was a thing back then. I just would do it over the telephone on a conference line. But I really loved doing that. And I loved doing coaching like that. And so we started expanding that out. And in the next year, '04, I just started expanding that out. We started running ads on Google. We started doing other stuff. And I started doing teleseminars for the presentation. And long story short, April 19th of '04, I sold the cleaning and restoration business and we moved into the publishing company full time.
Yes.
And none of that would have even happened if it weren't for Joe suggesting, why don't you do this? Are you open to doing this? And the cool thing was, John, is that Joe and I, we never had this conversation about, oh, if we do this, we're going to make all this money together. It
Hmm.
was always about, he's like, Kevin, if you come down, you're doing something really cool. And I think folks would really appreciate hearing from you. And he was right. They did appreciate it. And he would have never put me there if he thought for 1 second that I would damage the relationship that he already had with all those people that he got to
Hmm.
attend that seminar. He knew that I would help him further the relationship that he had with those people, and that afterwards they would be like, man, Joe, thanks so much for having Kevin share. That was really awesome. And I learned through that. And I didn't realize it at the time, but that was my very first ever strategic partnership was with Joe. And we went on, my gosh, I've done hundreds and hundreds of them since then. And, but yeah, that was how it all started. And that was how that whole publishing company got started, was just from that conversation with Joe.
Amazing. So you took all of that experience that you'd had at that point and realized, hey, the cleaning and restoration business has been my first vehicle to become a teacher, but I can
Yeah.
actually replicate this and become a publishing house. Is that correct?
Yes, that's
So
correct. That's correct.
how did that come about? And tell me about the next stage on that journey.
So I ended up getting a phone call from one of the guys who was in the audience at Joe's event that I spoke at. His name was Mike. He was not a carpet cleaner or a restoration guy. He did what Joe did, except he worked with home inspectors instead of cleaning and restoration contractors.
Yes.
And Mike got a hold of me and was like, hey, I was at Joe's event and I saw what you did. I would like to have you do something for my folks. And we ended up setting it up where I was going to do a teleseminar presentation. So what we did is we just chose the date that we were going to do this on. And then I got him some emails to use to promote it and stuff. And he sent some emails out to his folks. And we ended up doing this presentation. So it was very similar to what I did at Joe's. Now I'm just doing it over the telephone and stuff instead of being there in person.
By the way,
And
I should pause you there for some people who I know who will watch this. Teleseminars were the precursors to webinars.
yes,
We should just make
yes.
that clear.
Yes. So a teleseminar, you just use a conference line and you
Yeah.
can get hundreds of people on a conference line and they're all in listen only mode, unless you open up the line and you try to interact with them. But other than that, they're just in listen only mode and you're doing a presentation or whatever you're doing.
When
And
I
so,
tell anyone I know, like 30s and under, about like 90s and early 2000s technology stuff, they're like, what? You might as well be talking about like treetop telephone with two tin
yeah, right.
cans.
Yeah, for sure. Yes, there was a time before we had Zoom or before we had webinars or any of that stuff. Yeah, we just got on the telephone with a bunch of people on the line. And so yeah, so we did that presentation for Mike's folks. And I had told Mike, I was like, here's what we'll do. If this works for you, we'll just do a 60-40 split. And whatever revenue comes in, I'll give you 40% of that. Mike's like, yeah, that's totally cool. And so we did that. And we ended up doing 48,000 in revenue from that event with Mike.
Hmm.
But the product that we sold, it was at $1,191 price point. So but it was 3 monthly installments of 397 is what it was.
Yes.
And so we had all these initial rounds of installments of $397 that came in. And so I've never really done this before, but I'm just like, if I was Mike, I'd appreciate getting paid quickly. And so what I did was I just overnighted him a check. So I wrote him a check And I just wrote him a handwritten note just saying, hey, Mike, man, really enjoyed doing this project with you. And here's your first check. We'll have two more installments rounds coming in, one in 30 days, one in 60 days. And we might get some refunds or whatever returns in there. And that'll all come out in the wash. And so here's your check for this first round of installments. And I sent that off to him via overnight mail. And he calls me the next day, John, and he's just completely beside himself. And he's like, Kev, I got to tell you, man, I have never had anyone overnight me a check like this before. And that really made an impression. And he's like, and beyond that, man, everything that like we did right from our first conversation when you told me, okay, I'm going to have the promo materials to you by this date, and you had them to me 3 days before. And throughout the whole process, you were just keeping us in the loop of this is how many people are registered. And throughout the 24 hours of the sale process, you were letting us know, hey, this is how many people have invested so far. This is where we're at. And you just made it such a great experience. And I would like to introduce you to a couple of more folks, if that's okay with you. And I'm like, man, that'd be great. And that's how the whole thing started. And from then on, that's how I did almost 500 strategic partnerships over 12 years, is I just gave my partners a really great experience. The overnighting the check thing did become a pretty big deal because it was so unique. Nobody else was doing it. And after time, I would end up going to seminars or whatever. I'd meet people and they'd meet me for the first, and they're like, oh my God, you're that guy. You're that guy who overnights the checks. They'd actually heard about it because so many people were talking about it,
Yes.
But yeah, that's how we grew that business and stuff. And that's how I did almost 500 strategic partnerships in 12 years.
And so as that went and rolled on, you're just bringing in different people from slightly different niches and industries and promoting their products. You've got the distribution set up. You've got the system to actually create the product and deliver it for them as well.
Yeah. And most of the time, we were offering my product to their audience and stuff. That's what it was most of the time. Now, I did promote other people's products too and stuff on occasion because I did build a pretty large. My audience, by contrast, I built a subscriber list through that process of about 40,000 people. And by contrast, yeah, my goodness, I did a strategic partnership with Bill Harris in fact, I did a bunch of them with Bill over the years before he passed away. But my goodness, he had a company called Holosync. That was his product name.
I remember that product. That was a cool product.
It was a cool product. Yeah.
Yes.
But his company, I'm having a brain fart on his company now. Heck, I've even been to his place. He lived like 3.5 hours from me. But my goodness, he had 1 million people on his email subscriber list. And you talk about packing some punch. My gosh, Bill and I did a project together. He sent out one email. My other partners would send out 3, 4, maybe even 5 emails. Bill, he sent out one. And we ended up packing that out, and we did 168,000 in revenue from that one teleseminar that we did with Bill's audience over a 90-minute period and stuff. But yeah, by contrast, I had a much smaller email list, but because I treated partners so well, and because I ended up creating a really good reputation for myself, I was able to attract big partners like that, even though I wasn't running a business anywhere near their scale and stuff.
When you collaborated with these partners, would you customize your product and your presentation for their audience and for their market?
Yes, we would. And it wasn't much. There was just like maybe 3 or 4 places throughout the presentation where I would get information from my partner so that I could tailor it to their audience. But yeah, with just like 3 or 4 different places throughout that 90-minute presentation that we would tailor it. Yes.
And because you had so many partners, did you run on a calendar basis where you would promote things seasonally throughout the year, or did you have evergreen promotions as well?
So I never did. I ran on a calendar and stuff. So we would schedule calls or teleseminars and stuff. And for me, the best days to do it was either on Tuesdays or Wednesdays. If
Hmm.
we got into Thursdays, Fridays, Saturday, that the response would fall dramatically. So we would just look at Tuesdays and Wednesdays. And later, I ended up automating a lot of that. I used to, for many, gosh, probably for 3 years, I did every teleseminar live. And so I was doing them 2 times a week, typically on Tuesdays and Wednesdays. And so I was doing about eight partnerships a month and doing them on Tuesdays and Wednesdays. And I was doing them live until
Hmm.
one day, my partner, he wasn't there to introduce me and stuff. And I was like, oh, shoot. He got his wires crossed on the time or whatever. And so I just had to run with it. And I'm thinking, like, my partner wasn't here to introduce me. We're probably not going to have nearly as good a results, but we'll just do this anyways. And come to find out, it didn't impact results at all. And what I discovered was my partner had already introduced me to everybody in the emails that he'd been sending
Hmm.
out stuff. So he didn't necessarily need to be on the line to introduce me. A lot of times my partners would get there. Maybe they'd stay, they'd introduce me and then turn it over to me. Maybe they'd stay, maybe they wouldn't. But either way, I would just run with it. But what I found out through that was like, oh, you don't have to do this live. And so I ended up creating a recording. And that what that also opened up was I used a company called Instant Teleseminar for my teleconference line. Now I just got another Instant Teleseminar account so I could run 2 calls each day on during the week. So now I could have them going on simultaneously on 2 different conference lines and stuff. So that opened up a lot of bandwidth there by having 2 teleconference lines and stuff.
Yes. So that was like that was almost a precursor to what's now an automated webinar.
Yes, yes. And yeah, in my early days, it was definitely not automated, but still, even though I'm doing these live, that was a really good, in my mind back then, that was a really good use of my time because that hour and a half spent on that teleseminar, on that phone call with those people, that led to a lot of revenue being created. When you're able to spend an hour on or 90 minutes on the phone and then create 30, 40, 100,000, 150,000 in revenue, that's a pretty good return on your time investment. And I was
Absolutely.
totally cool with doing that, but it was cool to find out, oh, I don't have to do this. I can automate this and I can just play a recording and it's going to get the same results.
Yes. And so over time, you've built up a publishing house, but at a certain time, you decided to transition into, I actually don't need to do the publishing anymore. I can just put the deals together. So how did you come to that way of thinking?
Introducing Brian Kurtz and Perry Marshall 14 years ago was what planted the seed. And seeing what those guys did together after I introduced them. And 8 months later, they're hosting this event called the Titans of Direct Response. And there was like 300 entrepreneurs that attended that event and invested to be in that. And that first morning, I'm getting text messages from like 4 of my friends who were in the audience saying, hey, I'm at Perry and Brian's event and they're on stage opening comments right now talking about you and how you introduced them and that this thing wouldn't even be taking place if it wasn't for your role in it and stuff. And that's what first got me thinking, wouldn't it be cool if I could have a business where I just got to do that all the time? And it wasn't until 2017, the spring of that year, like March of that year, I was talking with a friend of mine, good friend of mine, Tim. And at the end of our conversation, almost in passing, he's like, why have you never held an in-person get together for all these amazing entrepreneurs that you know? And I'm like, I don't know. I guess I've just never thought of it. And he's like, you should give some thought to that because if you did something like that, I would totally be there for that. And I'm like, you would? And he said, Kev, I would totally be there. And I'm like, so let me just make sure I'm understanding you because I live in Seattle, Washington. He lived in Tampa, Florida, all the way across the country. I'm like, so are you telling me, let's say I just hold this thing right here at my home and I charge $5,000. I said, are you telling me that you would hop on a plane, you would invest $5,000 and you would fly all the way out here to attend that event? He said, I would totally do that. I'm like, why would you do that, Tim? And he's saying, because I know the kind and caliber of entrepreneur that you would invite, and they would be people that I would want to meet. And I'm like, wow. And I couldn't sleep that night, John, because I'm getting so jazzed. I'm thinking like, wow, I'm just imagining what I would do and who I would want to invite. And I'm like, man, this is like hosting a party for a bunch of my cool friends. And so the next morning, I'm up at 5 a.m. and I'm sitting here at my computer and I start making the list. I start going through my email contacts. I start going through my Facebook friends list and just who would you want to invite? And I ended up making a list, probably about, I don't know, 100 or so people on the list. And once the list was made, I'm like, okay, why these people? Why are these the ones that you just like, these are the people that you wanted to invite? And what's the commonalities here? And every one of them, they already had well-established businesses and they were making a big impact through their businesses. And they too also placed a high value on relationships and stuff. And they're also some of the most giving and generous people I know. And now that I had the list, I actually had a conversation already scheduled that morning with my buddy Travis Sago. And
Hmm.
Travis was the very first person that I ever even ran the idea by. We finished our conversation and I just told him, I said, hey, I want to run something by you. And I was talking with Tim yesterday, and he put this bug in my head and starts talking to me about that I should host this event. And so I've been mulling it over, and I'm thinking about it. I'm like, man, I'm getting jazzed about it, Travis. And I'm thinking, like, man, I'd like to have you maybe come to this. It sounds like you'd be a really cool fit for this. And I started telling him about it, and he's, are you open to feedback? And I'm like, yeah, I'd love some feedback. And he's Kevin, I'm like Tim in the fact that I live in Russellville, Arkansas. I'm an hour away from my airport and you're an hour away from your airport on your end. So it's a whole day for me to get to you and another day to get home. And plus the 2 or 3 days that you're going to have this thing. He said, that's kind of 5 days away from my wife. And I'm not a big fan of travel and I'm not a big fan of leaving my wife, but Kev, I would totally come to your event for the same exact reason Tim said he would. And
Hmm.
I would want to meet the other people that you would invite. And you know what? You keep me posted of when this is. And he's because yes, I would want to be part of it and stuff. And John, over the course of that week, the first 6 people that I spoke with, all 6 of them said, Kev, if you do this, I will come to this. And John, I can't remember the last time before that I was 6 for 6 on any doggone thing. But it let me know that I was, and the 6th guy was this guy, Jesse Elder, who
Yes.
pushed me to set a date. And I was like, okay, I'll set a date and I'll let you know. And he's like, nope. He's set a date right now while we're talking. And so I looked at the calendar and I ended up choosing a date for August. And so we chose a couple of dates for August. He's like, okay, perfect. Now set another set of dates for 1 month later. And I'm like, why is that? He's like, Kev, you said you can only have 15 people max. You're going to max this thing out. So set another set of dates and give people the option between the two. And I'm like, all right. So I chose some dates for September. And he's like, perfect. He's signed me up for August. I'll send you the payment. Get a hold of the other guys. Let them know you got dates. Get their monies. Get them signed up. And keep doing your thing. And I'll see you in August. And
Nice.
so we ended up having 15 entrepreneurs attend that very first event in August of 2017. And I'm not going to lie, John, that first morning, on one hand, I'm like, wow, look who's sitting in my living room right now. Because we held it right on the other side of this wall, right in my living room there. And at the same time, I'm like, God, please let this be valuable for them. And as it turned out, it was really valuable for them. And at the end of those 2.5 days, I just simply said, hey, if you got value from being here, if you made some connections here that are going to help you grow and expand your business and make a much bigger impact in the world, and you'd like me to help you make more introductions like that for you, I would be totally honored to do that. I would ride with you for the next year and do that with you. And what I would like for my role in that is $25,000. And
Mhm.
Travis, he was the first one sitting right on my couch. I'm in. And after him, 5 more people said yes to that. So 6 people out of 15 said yes to that offer. 1 month later, in September, I had the second event and made the same offer again. Only had 14 people at that event. One guy couldn't make it at the last minute, but 6 more people said yes to that offer as well. We had 12 people that we launched it with in the fall of 2017. I will not tell you that everything was rainbows and unicorns from then on out, because it
Of
absolutely
course.
was not. I had a lot of personal growth to do. I had a lot of discovery process to go through. I was having one-on-one calls with everybody. I would never do that today. It's not effective. It's way more effective doing group stuff,
Yes.
And but it took me a while to figure that out. But 2 years later, by 2019, the fall of 2019, over 25 people had said yes to that offer. And at the same time, I had got to the point I was hating life, John. And I got to the point of that I'm not going to bring on another new client. I felt I was letting some people down. I was working like crazy hours, just trying to keep up with everything and stuff. And fortunately, we did work through all of that. And here it is, all these years later, 8 years later now, we've got a pretty good model. In fact, we've got a rocket model figured out now. And I've figured out how to do this really well. And I just continue to get better and better at using my God-given gifts of just bringing the right entrepreneurs together and stuff.
So did you move to more of a mastermind model over time, or because it sounds like that
Yeah.
first run out was more like a digital, I'm going to be your huckleberry, like I'm going to work with you one on one.
Yes. Yeah. And now, yes, I bring groups of entrepreneurs together. It's not so much a mastermind as it is us all opening our networks for each other. Because at any given time, John, any entrepreneur, they're always looking for new clients and stuff, or their new partners and new clients. That's a given. They're always looking for that. But depending on what's going on in their life and their business, they might be working on a project, they might be trying to figure this out, they might be dealing with a specific challenge, and they're always looking for the right people to help them and stuff. And so that's what it's really about, is making these connections and opening our networks for each other for the purpose of helping all of us grow our businesses, make a bigger impact in the world. And because I've intentionally chosen to serve, it's one thing to say serve an entrepreneur who's running a startup business, or maybe say doing 50, 100,000 a year, versus an entrepreneur who's running an established business that's doing 5 million, 100 million, 500 million a year. Whole different ball game over there. And it's way easier to make a big impact over there too and stuff. One fit connection is incredibly valuable to those people. And
Yes.
that's the role that I get to hold for them. I get to be their connector and their conduit of trust and stuff.
And so with the people you serve, it sounds like from what you said, because I know so many of those names, that those are all people who are inside of digital marketing, direct response, and then people have probably been who are very well established and have been in the industry for a long time for the most part. Is that right?
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And we ended up launching the $1 Million Relationships podcast 3 years ago. And we've released I know we're over 300 episodes that we've have released now, but my buddy Brad Costanzo was the one who really championed that with me. And he could see what I didn't see at the time, because he'd already been running a podcast for 10 years. Podcast has been such a valuable tool in just continuing to connect me with the right kind of entrepreneurs. They just come to me because of that podcast and stuff. And so, yeah, that is, and for the guy who is just this connector and conduit of trust for this caliber of entrepreneur stuff, to have a podcast like that where I'm just continually on a weekly basis meeting new of the right kind of entrepreneurs through that podcast, that, like I said, that has become such an invaluable tool in so many ways.
So at this point, what you do, you operate almost like you do like a matchmaker, that you are always collecting like information, and then you're meeting new people, and you're thinking about who can go together with who, and who actually has
Yes.
good crossover in their audiences and their offers and could cross promote each other.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's not even necessarily always about cross promoting, but it is about being of service to each other and stuff. with what I mentioned about Joe, the whole conversation that I set up for these entrepreneurs is, hey, this isn't about getting anybody else to promote you or to tell their clients about you. Of course, that's what will happen, but the way we want to have this conversation is, how do we bring our gifts, our abilities, our resources to the table for this other person, so that we can help them further the relationship that they already have with their prospects, with their clients, with their network and stuff. That's the conversation we want to have. We want to just have this co-creative and collaborative conversation, this exploratory conversation around how can we do something far bigger together than either of us could possibly do on our own. And that's the deals that I love setting up. That's the deals. I love teeing those conversations up. And even sometimes I get on the line when they have those conversations and stuff, and just help them explore that, because I just like the experience of that discovery, and that exploratory process that's what I did in my own business for so many years. And now to help entrepreneurs of this caliber have that kind of a conversation, because that's not the conversation they would typically have. But when I help them facilitate that, that's a game changer for sure.
And at this point, do you see, like, when you put deals together, is it typically one-to-one, or do you find that there now will be more than multiple people around the table when you're getting a deal done?
When I start, it's one-to-one. Now, they might definitely bring in other team members and what have you. But for me, typically, I'm working either with the founders or the CEOs of the companies and stuff. And I've had people try to say, hey, I have this person, they're my chief marketing officer, and that's who I want to have you work with and stuff. And I'm like, no. I totally understand why you want to do that, but here's the deal. You're the visionary for the company. And so you are the one that I would serve. I don't serve anybody else in your company. I said, you're the one I communicate with, and you're the one that I'm going to make introductions for, and that I'm going to make introductions to. And if you don't want to do it, that's totally cool, but it's not going to be a right fit for me. And so,
Yes.
because that's the level at which I want to be able to make these introductions at. I don't want to say, hey, I'm going to connect you with the CMO and you're going to go through the bureaucracy and what have you, and maybe you'll get to the top. No,
Yes.
We start there. And then if you need to bring other team members in to get stuff done, totally cool. But we start right there. So
Yes. Once it starts to get bureaucratic, I think people who do this kind of thing on some level dropped out of the world of bureaucratic companies, are allergic to all that stuff. It just becomes hell very quickly.
Yes. And I want to make introductions that are going to go somewhere, not get stuck in bureaucracy. Yeah.
And so at this point, with what you do, has your model now become advisory, or do you work on a partnership basis with people?
So I suppose I do a little bit of advisory stuff. A more accurate term is I'm a facilitator. That's what I am. That's how I look at myself. So I'm getting these entrepreneurs on, say, Zoom calls and stuff, and I'll get 4, 5, 6 of them together at a time. And I just give them a structure for the conversation, and just allow them to start having the conversation, having the right conversation with the right people for the right reasons.
Yes.
And I just facilitate that. And I might jump in, but for the most part, I'm just listening as they have the conversation, and I'm facilitating it from there and stuff. And so my role more is, and I'll tell you, now that Zoom has this little AI companion thing, man, I love that thing, because I used to sit there taking notes all the time on so-and-so promises to make an introduction to so-and-so, because I'm going to follow up on all that and say, hey, John, you told Shelly you were going to connect her with stuff. Let's make sure that happens and stuff. And so that's more my role in the facilitator like that. And now that Zoom has this little AI companion. Man, I love that thing because now I don't have to take notes or nothing. I can just be totally 100% engaged in the conversation with everybody. And at the end of the call, I get this summary, and it is amazing. And it's here's my list of every promise that everybody made for each other. And now my job is just to help them follow up on that and make sure that those commitments get honored and stuff, and those connections get made and all of that. So that next month we come back and, okay, tell us what happened. What happened with your conversation with so-and-so? What came of that? And we start off sharing wins on every call. And that's how we start that off, is just following up from last month. What are the wins that we've had since the last month? And that's my role. So it's more, yeah, maybe a little bit consultant, but way more facilitator than consultant and stuff. So
Yeah, almost like chairing a meeting, right?
yeah,
Because
yeah,
there's that element of somebody has to keep the record of what's happened, and then somebody has to follow up to make sure that what was talked about actually got done.
yes. And that's my role, is to help provide some of that accountability. And I've learned over the years how to effectively do that, because the thing is, entrepreneurs at this caliber, they are busy. They're no doubt. And as soon as they get out from under my umbrella, as soon as we cut bait from that Zoom call, they're on with the rest of their day, whatever they got.
Mhm.
And I'm really adamant about, okay, you know what, John, Jerry promised to make a connection for you. So right now, you guys follow up on that right now. Jerry, put your email in there. And John, you send Jerry an email right here, right now, while we're on this call, to set that in motion so that we can have that set in motion before we get off this call here and stuff. I do that all the time, you know.
Yeah.
And
The immediacy
because
thing is so huge. It's so huge, isn't it? Because 30 seconds later, it's gone.
that's right. That's right. Totally. They hop out that call. Great call. And they're totally stoked about everything that was talked about. But by the time you get them next day, they're like, okay, what all did we talk about yesterday? So for me to be able to send out, and I just go through that AI generated list, and I line item it person by person. Here's all the opportunities that came up for you today, and here's the stuff to follow up on. And I'm going to be here if you need help with any of this. Just let me know, and I'm here to nudge anything along that needs to be pushed along a little bit and stuff. And I look forward to talking with you on the next call. And then before the next call, there's already going to be updates and stuff. And so I just keep that list updated throughout the month and stuff. And then as we go into the next call a month later, I'm sending, okay, here's the updated list of where we're at. Here's some of the things that have been happening. And look forward to talking with you on the next call and hearing about the wins. You can share wins with everybody. And we're just going to keep the momentum going. And whatever you're working on now and whatever you need help with going forward, we're just going to continue making those connections for you. And that's how I do it.
Okay. What's interesting is throughout this conversation we've had for the last 40 minutes or almost an hour now, you haven't really spoken about ads at all. You've spoken a little bit about email, but it sounds more like all these relationships and the nature of your business now has been built person to person. So how do you keep those relationships maintained over time and space now? Is it regular calls? Do you attend a lot of conferences? How do you keep up with everybody you need to know to be that facilitator?
It's interesting. For the longest time, John, I never even used a CRA. I
Hmm.
just did it all right here and stuff. And it was just, and so now I share some of the stuff that I do with the AI companion on Zoom and that kind of stuff. But now, as far as I don't run any ads for what we do or anything like that. Every new person in my life, even for the podcast, everybody that comes in to do an interview for the podcast, they're all referred to me by somebody who's already been on the podcast and stuff. Everybody that comes into my life is via a referral. Everybody. There are no random people that come into my life, and I don't want random people coming into my life. And
Yes.
the ads, if I were to run Facebook ads and all that, I've never even tried it, but I do not believe that the kind and caliber of entrepreneur that I serve is going to respond to a Facebook ad offering a webinar or whatever. Yeah, as a general rule, they don't respond to that kind of stuff. They don't even pay attention to that kind of stuff. When they are looking for resources, when help to solving a problem or help take an event, they just go to their networks and stuff. That's what they do, is they go to their networks. They start reaching out to people they know and say, hey, this is what I'm working on. Who do you know that might be able to help. And for me, my goal is I want to be that key go-to person that they come to me in my world for that. And that's been my intention for a long time now, is I want to be that guy in the right people's influence and sphere of influence and stuff. And but in the past, yes, I'm getting ready to leave actually next week. I'm going to an event up in Toronto. My friend Giovanni Marsico is putting on an event next week in Toronto, and I'm going to be out there for a few days attending that event. So I do go to stuff like that, and I do meet entrepreneurs at events like that and stuff. But even if I didn't go to those events, I'm still meeting plenty of people through the podcast and stuff. If I never attended a single event, the podcast would continue to bring plenty of the right kind of people into my life and stuff.
Brilliant. To that person who might be a little bit like earlier along the way, starting out, is still in that part of, I think everyone with it early on, they don't know too many people and they don't know where to look and who to trust. How do people start to build up a valuable network of trusted relationships that they could be people that they could be doing business with for years to come, and people that can go beyond business to being friends and actually being somebody meaningful to them in their life? How do they go about finding those people?
So how you and I met is such a perfect example of this. With social media these days, it is so easy to meet people. And so, John, you and I, this conversation right here is the very first conversation you and I have ever had.
Yes.
Prior to this, we've never even spoke before, but yet we've seen each other on Facebook and stuff. And I don't know, a month or two ago, I had put a post up on, I don't even remember what the post was about now, but my buddy Brad Spencer had commented on it and mentioned your name and said, hey, Kev, if you and John don't already know each other, you really should get to know each other and stuff. So through that, you and I we started communicating a little. We just sent messages back and forth. And I'm like, Brad's got a point there. I have seen you on Facebook for a long time, but I don't know that much about you or anything. I was like, why don't we make time to talk and get to know each other? And you were like, heck, Kev, yeah, I'm totally down that. You up for doing a podcast interview? And I'm like, sure. And here we are. That's how, and look how natural and organic that was. And that's how it happens. And I'll let you in on a little secret. If you want to tee up these conversations, all you got to do is be genuinely appreciative of people. So here's how this works. Because it doesn't matter how successful somebody is, how big of a business they run. It doesn't matter how great things look from the outside looking in. There is not a person on the face of this planet that gets too much appreciation. And so when we see people post stuff on social media, when we see them write an article, when we see them put out some content, whatever, when it resonates with us, reach out to that person and let them know and say, hey, John, you know what, man, that post you put up this morning, I really appreciate what you shared there. Man, that really hit home with me, and here's why. And I just wanted to send you a quick message and let you know that, man, you're appreciated. And I'll tell you what, just doing that, you'll get people responding back to you and stuff. Because, John, I don't know how often, I'm sure you get some of that, but you're not just going to blow it off when somebody's showing genuine appreciation like that. You're going to probably at least reply and say, hey, wow, thanks so much for that. Thanks so much for sharing that. I really appreciate that. It's going to start a dialogue. And when we just come from the heart, and I got this lame email this morning.
The fake AI compliments.
Oh my gosh. And I replied to him just to be I don't know. So here's this email I got this morning. Hey, Kevin, I'm reaching out to you directly to see if you're interested in becoming a member of the Founders Club. Looks like you guys are making a real impact with your innovative approach to marketing strategies. We only accept a limited number of founders per city each month into the club, but I've noticed you might be a great match. So I wanted to personally extend an invitation to you because what you're doing in the consulting space with Maximum Response is awesome. You open to a quick discovery call. That was the email. And so I replied and I was like, okay, I'll play along, Chris. What exactly is maximum response doing in the consulting space that grabbed your attention and compelled you to offer us one of your limited number of founder spots? And I haven't heard nothing back from you yet, and maybe I will, maybe I won't. But that is not heartfelt email right there. That is
Yeah.
BS stuff, trying to just get your way in. And you know what? The kind of entrepreneurs we really want to connect with, that does not get it done.
No.
You got to be straightforward, be honest, have integrity, come from the heart. And you know what? Showing genuine appreciation for people, that's going to get you far more further than an email trying to do stuff like that. And you want to start conversations, then start having conversations from there. And here's the thing, when you're having conversations with entrepreneurs, don't worry about trying to, you got to impress anybody or show them how smart you are, because nobody gives a damn. What will get you, start asking an entrepreneur a question like, coming straight from the heart. Hey, John, if I were to ask you, man, what are you working on right now that's got you the most excited? You know what? You're going to start telling me about that. You're going to start telling me about what you're working on and what you're, and then, and when you, as you do, I'm going to start asking you more questions about it and stuff. And I don't have to share a doggone thing. I don't have to. And see, I've been doing this stuff for years. And I'll tell you, it's not strategic, it's not tactical, it's not any of that. It's just connecting heart to heart, human to human, and having a conversation. And I'll tell you what happens when we communicate this way and just are genuine. We give people a gift that they so seldom get to receive, which is this gift of feeling seen, heard, and understood. And we don't have to say a doggone word about ourselves or what we do or nothing to give them that feeling. All we got to do is ask questions and then listen. And then guess what? They're going to just start asking us questions because they're genuinely interested in getting to know us and stuff. That's how you start this whole thing.
Thank you. Yeah, a lot of pretty much everything you said there is principles I agree with and try to live by as much as I can, but it's great to hear the same thoughts coming from you too. So I appreciate that a lot. And the truth is, it's like I've done different things over the last few years. Some things that have been more business and some things more helpful and some things that are mixed between the two. And the things that always stand out in my mind is not necessarily where it was about the money, but it was where you did something, somebody paid you, but then they sent you a message of appreciation afterwards. And they told you, not even just a message of appreciation, how you helped them change a situation. I remember one in particular where somebody had hired me just to help them pay them for some advice, a bit of a consulting session, where they were feeling really stuck in a situation where they just didn't enjoy with a job and they wanted to go solo. And I helped them put together a plan and gave them some guidance on how they could actually take steps to get there. And then a few months later, they sent me a message saying, hey, this is my first day of solo entrepreneurship. I'm sitting in a coffee shop. I've got nobody telling me what to do. I'm on my own calendar for the first time in years, and I feel great.
Wow.
Thank you so much. And I can still remember getting that message and how nice I felt afterwards. And
Yeah.
whatever amount of money, I can't remember what they paid me or whatever. And I can't even remember what advice I gave them. But I do remember the message of appreciation they sent me afterwards.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, because that's the stuff that really connects with us and stuff. I remember when one of the early podcast interviews I did was with this guy, Nick Lucas. Now, Nick, I met him probably back in 2015, so 10 years ago. And him and I were both in this guy, Kevin Nations, had a family mastermind and stuff. And Nick and I were
Yes.
both in Kevin's family mastermind group at the time. And in the course of doing the podcast interview with me, and this would have been like 8 years later. But during the course of the interview, he tells me, Kevin, he said, remember that place that Kevin used to host his get-togethers down there in Vegas, that really cool venue with because it was like this really not a square wall in the place and stuff. It was all the rounded corners and windows. It was just way cool and very unique. And I'm like, oh yeah. I said, I remember that place. Man, that was a really beautiful place and stuff. And he said, I will never forget that conversation that you and I had that one day at Kevin's meeting there. And he's just the way you made me feel so doggone important. And John, as he's telling me this on the podcast interview, I'm like, you know what? I don't remember that conversation at all. I don't remember what we talked about. I don't have a clue. I couldn't even remember. And I knew Nick was in Kevin's group, and I remember meeting Nick there. But you know what? He remembered that conversation like it was yesterday. And I didn't
Yes.
remember it at all. But it was because how it made him feel. That's why he remembered it and stuff. And that you receiving that letter, that message of appreciation from that person, man, that makes us feel really incredible to get that kind of stuff. And yeah, it's
It
cool that
does.
we can do business and that we can help them and make them more successful and help their business be more profitable. But it's the genuine appreciation from them that really sticks with us far more over and above the stuff that we helped them do. Yeah, no.
Yes. It's really interesting what really sticks with people. I have a friend who's gone from nothing to being very successful now. And it's interesting things he talks about because he said it doesn't really matter about the money, even though he makes an awful lot.
Yeah.
But I've talked to him and I didn't really know if he was sincere at first. But when I got to understand more about where he came from, where he started out and where he's got to, and that how he's become a turning point in the history of his family, and he sees himself as the turning point in his name, and that
Wow.
all the generations that came before him struggled in poverty, and he's the guy who's changing the story of the family for the next few generations to come. And that's what really gives him a sense of pride and power more than the money he's made, which is just basically a tool and a vehicle for him to fulfill this, like this kind of vision that he
Absolutely.
has for himself.
Yes. Yeah. You're right. Yeah, it's not the money is a tool that allows us to do things and stuff, but it's the impact that we make that gets to inspire. That's what inspires us. That's what keeps me going is I just want to play a game worth winning. I want to play a game where I can make a big impact. And because of who I serve, I do get to make a big impact. Those people, there might be millions of people impacted. They will never know I was even there. They will never even know I had a hand in it at all. And I don't
Mm.
care. I know that I did. And that's all that matters. That's all that matters. And it just makes me feel good. And it's, man, I want to do more of that. And yeah.
Brilliant. I think that's a great note to say that's a wrap on. And really appreciate you taking the time to come and talk to me today. Where is the best place for people to find out a little bit more about you? Should they come and listen to your podcast, or what would you like them to do?
Yeah, go check out Million Dollar Relationships podcast. You can find us on Apple, Spotify, what have you. And if what we're doing there, if that resonates with you and you'd like to come on the podcast and honor some people in your life that have had such a profound impact on your life and on your business, I'd be more than honored to have a conversation with you, get to know you a little bit. And if it makes sense, we can totally do an interview for the podcast and stuff.
Awesome. Love to. I'm going to stop the recording now and then we can set a date. Cheers, Kevin.
Awesome.